all of you that have been out of town. Okay, we're gonna save it, and we're gonna have Ken come and talk to you when you're back here in town. So we've had a wonderful time over the past few months. We've had kids coming and getting inspired. We've had lots of visitors who've really enjoyed it. And tonight we have a treat that we get to hear from Ken himself. So if you haven't been in the gallery yet, when Ken's done talking, you should visit the exhibit. And also at 5 o'clock, we'll have music for you out in the courtyard with Rich Shelley. So we've got a great evening planned for you, and we're so glad you're here sharing it with us. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken. Let's all welcome him.
Thank you. Every time I step right here, I get I'm trying not to. That's right. Yeah, so one of the things that really resonates with me, as she was mentioning, I'm just happening to think about it right now because Charlotte just mentioned it, is how kids came and they found out about how these photos were produced and everything. Which obviously it teaches art, but it also teaches science and physics and things like that as well. And being a special ed teacher, a former special ed teacher, I retired about 3 years ago. That just really resonates with me. So I just wanted to mention that and how important things like this are, and what an important function the museum brings to our community. So anyway, I am self-taught in night photography, and as we go along, I'm going to describe how we do this. I'll also describe a whole bunch of other things. This is going to be a really informal sort of thing. If you're expecting a specific lecture, sorry. But it will just be fun. I'm going to answer a lot of questions right off the bat that people often ask about the exhibit. So I'll start. So as I mentioned, I'm self-taught in night photography, and I especially love creating photos of abandonment because I love the history. You're looking at airplanes and buildings, and you're thinking, what was the story behind this? So what happened? And it allows me to kind of step in and create my own story. This is abandoned, but it's not on this earth. Or things like that. So basically, I just kept taking photos of things like this. I also photograph nature as well, and then I just kept posting it on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Vero, and things like that. And one day, someone contacted me and said, "Would you be interested in publishing books?" And I thought, maybe we could work something out. That sounds pretty good. And so I started publishing books, and my second one was entitled Abandoned Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So now you're probably guessing where this exhibit came from, or where the inspiration was for this. So absolutely. So these are 28 photos that are taken, I think all but one, I forget which one, is taken from the book. So I have 3 books published in total, which are right up there, and one more coming out. I'm not entirely sure when, but it's up to the publisher, but probably early next year. So I've been in National Geographic books. Well, not me personally, but my photos. Omni Magazine, Los Angeles Times, Westways Magazine, Smithsonian, I think it was, and several others, and then lots of encyclopedias and books and magazines and things like that. So I also teach. I haven't gone away from teaching. I've just gone away from teaching special ed for a public school district. So I teach night photography workshops, and just ended one about a little bit more than a week ago, I think it was. Let's see, what else? Oh, right. I'm an author at Photofocus, which is an online education website for photography, and I also serve on the editorial board there. So that's what I do. So how I got into night photography. So now we're in the common questions part of the presentation. Excuse me for a second here. Well, there's two answers for this. The first one was way back when, 2000, 2001, back when they used to use film. Back in the old days, yes. Pre-Facebook. I was walking down the beach with Lisa, my wife here, and we came across this gentleman's exhibit. He had a whole bunch of these very large prints of Joshua Tree. And with those prints, they were all taken at night, and he had shadows. So what he had done is he had shined the light of his hands onto a bunch of rocks and people and things like that. So he had all these incredible shadows on the rocks. And so I stopped and talked to him and thought, this is really cool. And I just kind of squirreled away this sort of information, because sometimes when we find out things, we're not quite ready to completely process it or take action with it. But I remember him saying, there's more light at night than you think there is, and that always stuck with me. So even when we're under starlight, more light than we think there is. And that'll become evident with these photos as we talk about it. So that's one way. And then the second thing was around 2010, 2011, I went to the Atacama Desert in Chile. Some of you, especially if you're astronomy buffs, might know that there's a whole bunch of large array of telescopes there. And it's because the atmosphere is just perfect for it. It's high up, it's above 8,000, 9,000 feet. The air is really dry. The ocean somehow keeps everything away. There's a mountain range that kind of blocks the more humid air from coming in. So it's vivid. I mean, it almost feels like you can reach up and pluck the very stars from the skies. It's just incredible. And it's one of those places, I don't know if anybody's been to such a dark place that almost every minute you see a shooting star. Anybody? Yeah, okay, so you know how magical that is. Like when you see it just about every minute, there's a shooting star. Because most of the time when you see it, it's a very special event, but when you see it every minute, it's a really, really special event. So those two things combined together, I left Chile saying, I've got to learn how to photograph the sky. so that's sort of how I embarked on my journey. All right. Another question, we're going to take a little detour here, is how do you find these locations? Well, it's a multifaceted answer. So it's a combination of incessant wandering, lots of driving. So I always like to joke and say that some of the best things in life are found at the end of a dirt road. I mean, right, anybody who's explored the desert knows this to be true. So you can always find something interesting at the end of a dirt road, or not even at the end. There's that. Google Maps is my friend. Google Maps for sure, and Google Earth, of course. Blogs, Facebook groups, talking to other photographers, of course. Instagram, looking at photos and trying to figure out where it is based on the mountains. That's the most satisfying, when you see a photo and you can actually figure out where it is based on the mountains, and then a little judicious use of Google Earth or what have you. So, bugs. One fun old way, if you're really into ghost towns, is, you know how you go into antique stores and sometimes they'll have those really old maps? You'll see all these towns that don't exist anymore. Well, if you can figure out where those are on a modern map, there's maybe a little bit of chance that those are still there. So that's another fun way of doing it. Not an easy way of doing it, but a fun way. All right. This is my assistant, George. Not your assistant. Anyway, sorry about that. He's kind of a smart aleck. Yeah, he is very curious, it's true. So this is how I take photos, basically. I place a camera on a tripod, of course. I'm not hand holding it because I might have the shutter open for several minutes. So I place my camera on a tripod, and say if I'm taking a photo of George, I might line it up, like say where Kathy here is sitting, and then I press this button so the shutter opens, and it can be for a specific amount of time, or it can be in bulb mode, which means it's kept open until I'm finished doing my stuff. And so while the shutter is open, I will walk around, and let's say if I want to take a picture of George, I might light paint him. So something like this. And I never light paint from the front, because if anybody has ever used a flash before to photograph people, a flash that's on a camera, not very flattering, right? Unless you're trying to make everyone look really sickly pale or whatever. So usually I light paint from the side, and the reason why it's called light painting is because I am literally, very literally, painting on light. Instead of painting on paint, which would be rather destructive and something George wouldn't like, I'm literally taking paint strokes, or well, light strokes rather, and doing this instead. So, and yes, the light is cumulative. So, meaning that the longer I shine the light on George, the brighter it'll be in the final photo. So if I just do just a quick little thing, it's not so bright, but if I do it for a very long period of time, then he becomes brighter and brighter until he becomes too bright and all the details wash out. So that's how it's done. So the reason why I use a handheld light, such as this actually is one of the lights I use. The reason why I use a handheld light is because it's quicker and easier and more creative than using stationary lights where I just set it up and then, well, it's just there and that's the light I get and that's that. Now this isn't a diss on stationary lights because they have their purposes too. Like especially if you're doing time lapses or things like that, stationary lights can be wonderful. But for most, well, certainly everything in here, I'm using a handheld light for everything, all of these photos, every single one of them. So that's that. Next, we're going to talk about a superpower. I have it, but all of you have it as well. We all have the ability to turn invisible. It's true. Okay, so back to the example where we're taking a photo of George, right? So let's say if Kathy's taking a photo of George right here, and she's just opened the shutter, what Kathy can do is she can actually wander around in the frame, and as long as she's not shining the light back into the camera, or shining the light on her, herself, she won't appear in the photo if she keeps moving. You have to stand still for about 10% of the total exposure before you start showing up. And even then, you only show up as like sort of like a weird little smudge. It's like you almost can't tell that something's there. It just looks like a weird little smudge. So during a 2 or 3 minute exposure, you'd have, what is that? My math is not very good, but like for a 3 minute exposure, I think that's what, like 18 seconds, right? Yeah, so yeah, you have to stand still for a pretty long time. So that's how I'm able to, like in a lot of these, I'm walking around the scene. Like for this, for example, I'm actually shining the light directly into the headlights. And so I'm actually walking across the scene and popping the light into a flashlight. Sorry, popping the light into a headlight. So yeah, so that's how it's done. So in order to have this invisible power, though, another thing besides continually moving is ideally you should wear dark clothes. So that's what I do. These clothes are okay for light painting. Black is even better. And sometimes we even wear gloves if we're going to be illuminating certain parts of, like, say, a car or something that we think will be there for a little bit. We might put on some gloves just to make sure that the light doesn't come back on our hands. So that's how we do it. And of course, as I said before, we never ever shine the light directly into the lens because that creates streaks and stuff like that. Unless, of course, you want to do that. So, all right. So all of us have this amazing superpower. So you can experiment with this at home by using bulb mode and then walking back and forth. By the way, this technique, just as an aside, this is a technique that architectural photographers use. They'll set their camera and tripod in front of a building that they're trying to photograph during the day. And what they'll do is they'll put neutral density filters on, which are sort of like sunglasses for the camera. So it reduces the amount of incoming light. So that way they can shoot for, who knows, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever. And so what this does is it renders all the people walking past invisible. So a lot of times when you see those architectural photographs, that's how they're doing it. They're not doing it by saying, okay, all of you people scoot over. They're actually doing it using the same technique that us night photographers use. So, fun stuff. All right. Another fun question I frequently get is, have I ever seen a ghost? I'm sorry to disappoint, but the answer is no. However, I have been in some extremely creepy places where I thought, yeah, I think I want to leave. So far, the creepiest place that I have been in is Moundsville Penitentiary. So this is in one of the panhandles in West Virginia. Okay, picture this. It's made out of stone. It's a Gothic style architecture, and it's really imposing. It has turrets and the whole bit. The walls are sometimes 5 feet thick. It is so large that there's bats flying through it. And so we went in there, and the person said, "Do you want any lights on?" And we said, "Oh no, we're night photographers. Oh no." So they switched all the lights off. It is creepier than creepy in there. I mean, so the only light is the one in our hands. And so we're roaming through, there's like, you know, maybe a little bit of broken glass here, and there's like broken stuff over there. And we're literally wandering through something that's abandoned. I mean, yes, it might be part of a state park, but it's still abandoned. And so we're wandering through that, taking photos. So the first place that I took a photo of was because it was still sort of light outside. And so I thought, well, I'll go in the Sugar Shack first. So what the Sugar Shack was it was a basement that served as a recreation room for the inmates there. And the Sugar Shack was one of those places where the wardens, they didn't go, they just said, yeah, you guys do whatever you want in the Sugar Shack, it's all good. So, as you can imagine, with a whole bunch of hardened prisoners doing life in there, things got ugly in there. There were rapes, beatings, murders, the whole bit. So I went down there with my camera and I took a photo, or I started to. But so what I usually do is I have a little headlamp and I put it down on the ground or wherever, or on the table. There were no tables there. So I put it down on the ground, and then I set my camera up, and then I tripped the shutter, and I started walking, and right then, my headlamp decided to run out of batteries. So it's pitch black in there. There's no light in there whatsoever. And so I had memorized steps, which I typically do just in case that happens. So I did, I memorized that it was 12 steps to the wall, then 20 steps over, shine the light, then I'll bring the light over to illuminate the pillars, and then I'm done. So I did all that, and then somehow managed to find my camera, because I had to wander back. And I only did that shot once, and I thought, yep, I'm done here. I'm finished. So yeah, that's by far the creepiest place I've been, and my headlamp going out didn't really help very much. So yeah. Let's see. Enough ghost stories. So I'm not going to read what I wrote in there because that's, you guys can do that. I will say that every single one of these photos is taken in the Mojave Desert, so it's fairly local. But I guess technically we're in the Colorado Desert here, but you know what I'm saying. But it's fairly local. Some of these are taken in auto salvage yards. This is at Pearsonville, which this auto salvage yard still exists, but once upon a time there were 4,000 cars there. Now there's only like maybe 30 or 40, something like that. This is at Nelson Ghost Town right here, which you can visit during the day. Those of you who drive up 95 towards Las Vegas, you can stop off there. So, yeah. So some of the trains, like this one, the locomotive number 9, that's at Law's Museum in Bishop. So some of you guys are familiar with that. So some of them, like this one, the airplane there, I can't tell where that is because I've promised not to, so always the word. Yeah, so that one I can't tell where that is either. Yeah, that's about it. Are there any questions?
Yeah, like that. That happened. And the bus.
Okay, so the last photo that was there, the one with the car on the side, that's in a wash. And I've really tried to research how those got there. As far as I can tell, they're probably left over from a mine, and our best guess is possibly that there was some sort of a car mechanic near a mine, and he was working on a bunch of cars, and some of them may have flooded into a wash. But we're guessing. We're totally guessing. So, but this one is taken in full moonlight, and there's probably about somewhere between 6 to 8 cars, I don't remember exactly, 6 to 8 cars that are in the wash. This is the only one, I think, that's on its side. So, of course, that's the one I had photographed first. And you might be able to see one that's upside down here. That's a Cadillac, which if you saw the Cadillac close-up, I think there's a lot of us who would love to have that car. Oh, by the way, just as an aside, you can tell what color this is. See how this is all rusty? And this is light blue? Hooray for Cadillac painting. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Every single one of these cars here is completely rusty except for that Cadillac. Yeah, so, any other questions? Yeah.
How do you determine how long of a shutter?
That's a great question. So how long of a shutter is what he's asking. So after a while you just know, but it's basically like, it's not terribly unlike taking a photo with a manual control camera during the day, only it's much longer. But a general rule of thumb is if the moon is out, like it's anywhere near a full moon, and you want lots of time, you can do f8, ISO 200 for about 2 or 3 minutes. It doesn't have to be exact. And obviously, for those of you who don't know, the f-stop is how large of an aperture the lens is, so in other words, how much light is let in. And ISO is how sensitive. That's not technically correct, so I know there's like one camera buff in here who's going, no man, it's amplification. Yes, I know that. Yeah, it's basically how sensitive to light it is in essence. So you can control those two things to shorten it, but that would be a good start. The Milky Way one, on the other hand, like the one with the plane, because you don't want the stars to move too much, because all the stars move because we're spinning, right? It's not really, I mean, yes, the stars move, but it's mostly because we're rotating. So it's amazing how much the Earth rotates in just a few minutes. So with these, they'll leave, well, that's a bad example, but they'll like actually leave discernible streaks. But if you don't want that to happen, you have to keep your shutter speed real low. So those Milky Way shots are about 20 seconds. So yeah, here we go. So this is about 15, 20 seconds right here. So I get all the stars as pinpoints. And so naturally to do that, I have to make the camera more sensitive, so I use a higher ISO. So this is probably ISO 4000. And then you also want to use a wide aperture, a big aperture. So this is probably about f2.4.
Do you Photoshop at all?
Oh yeah. Okay, so I Photoshop, but it's to process the photo. It's not to create fake stuff. So yes, there's really an airplane there, and yes, there's really stars there, and yes, those are really Joshua trees. So all of that's real. But I use Photoshop to process things like bring out the Milky Way or create a little texture by dodging and burning here and things like that. So yeah. Yeah?
So it looks like it's part day, part night.
Oh yeah.
I'm not very smart. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out.
No.
How does that look like dawn and it's still night when...
That actually, a question like this shows that you're smart, not dumb. Let me, yeah. So let's right off the bat. That's a smart question.
Figured out my head's
All right. So this is bright for two reasons. One is that the camera is more sensitive to light than our eyes are. Because obviously if we were standing there at light, even if I'm shining the light, it's really dark, right? So the camera is considerably more sensitive, especially when it's held open for 20 seconds at a very sensitive sort of setting. The second reason is artistic. If I go and print a really dark photo, what does it look like? It's like a black rectangle. So where's the fun in that, right? So I lighten it up so it prints real nicely. So it's a combination of the camera being sensitive and aesthetics, basically. And the dawn part.
Yeah.
That's light
It's like
pollution.
daylight there.
It's light pollution.
City or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that is absolutely light pollution. Now it would be so much more romantic to say those are the rays of the rising sun. But sorry, no, it's light pollution. Yeah, I want to fib so badly, but I cannot do it. So, okay. Any other questions?
How about the bus? Was it angled like that?
It is angled like that. So that is an art installation that's outside Goldfield, Nevada. There are 40 vehicles. Hey, there we go. Thank you very much. There are 46 vehicles that are planted in the ground, and yes, it's on purpose. Although my caption of the photo, I might even have it here in the caption. I frequently will write, I can drive well, I just can't park. But, so yes, what he did is using earth moving equipment and copious amounts of cement and who knows what else, He dug holes in here, then somehow the crane dropped these in here as an art installation. And one of his purposes was to try and break the Guinness Book of World Records. I don't know whether that's Cadillac Ranch or somewhere else, but he was trying to break the Guinness Book of World Records for the most amount of cars jammed into the earth as an art installation. And I believe he succeeded. Then this other guy came and started painting a lot of the things. So this doesn't show it so much, but a lot of my photos will show paintings of things like ants or devils or faces or animals or things like that. And then, of course, after a while, everybody came and started painting, and some people are not so great at painting as others, shall we say? Yeah, some is art and some is not, so I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, great question from a smart person. Yes?
Do you photograph by yourself or do you go out with other people?
Oh, that's a good question. Both. I enjoy both for different reasons. When I'm photographing by myself, I can get really in the zone and really focus on the art and things like that. So I enjoy that, but I also really enjoy the camaraderie of hanging out with people. So they're both enjoyable for different reasons. If I'm by myself, I've dialed it back because I got really excited about, I forget, it was like 2 or 3 years ago, and went on this road journey that took me 15 miles off the nearest paved road. And I was photographing a mining camp. And on the way back, I got a flat tire. And suddenly I'm thinking about the wisdom of this. You know, I better be able to fix this, because if I can't fix this, well, there's no cell signal. There's nothing. There's nothing around here. And no one knows where this is. So I fixed the flat tire, thankfully, and I managed to drive out there on one of those little donuts. And so my new rule, which I've kept to since then so far, is no more than 4 miles off the closest paved road. So 4 miles, I figure I can walk out of there in a reasonable amount of time. So 15 miles is really far to walk, especially at night. So yeah, great question.
Do you now carry a satellite beacon with you because of that experience?
No, however, I should, but I don't. I have it so she's tracking me at all times with my phone, because even if you don't have a cell signal, if you have someone tracking you, they have your general whereabouts, and it's frequently accurate up to 16 feet. So I do that, and I also, if it's any place obscure at all, I give her the exact coordinates, saying I'm going to be here from this amount of time to this amount of time. So that's sort of my safety thing. Also, those of you who have iPhone 14 and up have satellite function, so we can actually send a text using satellite. So, and I think Android can do that too, right? Some Androids can do that, I'm pretty sure. But I know iPhone 14 and up can do that. And I've tested it once before, so it does work. So there is that as well. But I don't have a Garmin InReach or anything like that. So, yeah. You guys are full of great questions.
I noticed this one blue on the inside, on light, like in the trains, for example, there's light inside. So are you painting all that, or are you setting up lights somewhere?
So all of these are done with handheld lights. This particular one was done in 2014. At the end of 2014, I got a light that produces RGB light. So it produces every light in the spectrum, all 360 degrees of that. However, this one was before that. So what this is a combination of two things. I lit the interior with my flash. Now my flash is off the camera, and so I'm just hitting the button over and over again, popping it manually. And then what caused the blue light is that I have a blue gel. Those of you who maybe work in film have heard of Roscoe Lux gels, right? So, and you put it over lights to create certain kinds of light. Well, Roscoe Lux, they sell a sampler pack. It comes in a book, and you can buy this for about, well, I bought it back then for about $7 or $8. And so what you do is you rip the book apart and then use the individual things to hold it over your flashlight or your speed light, your flash. So that's how I did the inside. And the outside was considerably lower tech. I used a flashlight and I shined it through a blue plastic bag. Actually, that reminds me. So much of this is low tech. You do not need super fancy equipment to do this. Both of my cameras are made in 2016. They're DSLRs, they're not mirrorless, so they're not fancy. I mean, yes, they're nice cameras, but they're old. They're 8-year-old cameras, which in camera years, that's like a dinosaur. So if it's a human, it's like the kid's just barely in elementary school. But you know, for cameras, wow, that's old. So yeah, that's how I did it anyway. So yes, sir.
Have you ever dabbled in film?
Yes, I've actually done night photography and other stuff with film, and it gave me a little bit of understanding of how to do this. But honestly, 95% of my knowledge has come from using a DSLR. But I was pretty comfortable with film.
So between the speed and the aperture and all that.
Yeah, I knew all that already. So, but you still have to learn it it's no different with digital. You still have to know that anyway. So, yeah.
The film is more touch and go.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but if you're doing a really long exposure with film, there's something called reciprocity failure, which basically in English means the longer you expose, the longer you need to expose. So as the film goes on, you need more and more light or more and more time coming in because it starts becoming less and less sensitive to light as you expose. So that's called reciprocity failure. So yeah. All right, good questions. Yes, sir.
Do you think that the older cameras with fewer megapixels are a little bit more suited for long exposures or no?
It depends. I hesitate in giving a concrete answer because on one hand, I know where you're going with this. If you have less megapixels, there's less opportunity for noise, like with the so I know what you're thinking. However, sensors keep advancing to the point of where you can use something like, I'm mostly familiar with Nikon and Pentax, because that's what I use here. But like, for example, if you use, say a Z8 or a Z9, which are modern cameras, well, those are low light beasts. I mean, they can photograph just about anything. They're with considerably less noise. So, yeah, it kind of depends. So there used to be this really useful website, maybe still is, called DxO, where they test all that for noise and stuff like that. But I don't get too hung up on noise, and here's why. First of all, a little bit of noise, unless you're blowing your prints up to 20, 30 inches or more, it doesn't really matter anyway. If you're showing it on Instagram, who cares? But the other thing is that we have software that gets rid of noise so much more effectively than just 2 or 3 years ago. You know, with Topaz or Lightroom, you could get rid of most of the noise almost instantly. So I just don't get too hung up on noise, as you can tell by the fact that I use 8-year-old cameras. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
These are all out in the middle of nowhere. Can you
Mostly,
do
yeah.
this in an urban area? I'm thinking of that creepy LA, abandoned LA zoo that's really spooky. And
Yeah, that's
it's
dark.
really creepy at night, but I don't know if there's too much light.
It's dark enough that you can do that, especially if you're zeroing in on specific items. However, your sky will not look like this. it'll look more whitish orangish, depending on what kind of light, because the ambient light is so bright. But the actual feature, the subjects that you're photographing, yeah, it's dark enough. You can do that.
Creepy stuff.
Oh, it's totally creepy. Yeah. And you think, wow, there used to be like animals in that tiny little
Have you
thing.
been there? It's really spooky.
Yeah. So yeah. All right. Any other questions? You guys have great questions, I must say. Yes.
Is it easier to photograph, of course, with the full moon? But what if there's no moon at all and it's totally dark? How does that compare to the lighting of the full moon?
Oh, well, I personally love the full moon, so it's a little easier for me. And part of the ease is because I can see where I'm going. You know, I mean, especially as I get older, it's but the good part of really dark places, and hi Tony, the really good part is that you have more latitude over your lighting. So if you want to light the thing differently, you can. So you have more freedom. So it sort of depends. So yeah, another great fun question. So any others? No. George.
Animals out there that are scary.
Scary animals.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. I've been fortunate. I've never been attacked by an animal, but I will tell you, I could go on for hours about being scared by animals. But probably the most amusing one was over here. This is called the Car Forest in Goldfield, by the way. I was photographing something where I was like kind of down here, just aimed up at something. And I was really focusing the camera and trying to get everything just right. And all of a sudden I hear this, and I mean, this is startling because it was very quiet. So I wheel around, and I'd say probably about, it felt like 10 feet, but it was probably about 15, 20 feet. There are two burros fighting, and they're like butting heads. And I forget what kind of sound, but it was a loud sound followed by a crash. And they did this several more times. Not only that, but there were like 5 other burros around. So 7 burros, including 2 fighting burros. And so once I got past the, just being completely frightened by this, I was also a little bit mad at myself that 7 large creatures had snuck up on me and I didn't know. So I was really frosted at that. Mostly it's bats and birds, like you walk into a building or under a bunch of trees and you startle some birds or bats and they come flying right at you and you can feel the wind. Mostly it's stuff like that. I did at Convict Lake. I was getting the equipment out of my car once, and I heard this rustling. The type of rustling that only a very large creature can make. And I whip around, and there's a deer just about 10 feet from me, just going. So yeah. But yeah, those are the ones that come to mind, but I've got tons of them. So any other questions?
Were the burrows, those were wild burrows, is that?
Yes. So in Nevada and parts of Death Valley, there are tons of burrows that are left over from miners and prospectors, and they've bred and they wander all over the place, and sometimes BLM or someone else will try and move them somewhere else or what have you, but they're pretty unsuccessful with that. Who here has stayed in Beatty, Nevada, like near Death Valley? Anyone? Oh, come on, guys. All right, so there's this little town, and it's a great cheap. I shouldn't even tell you guys about this because now all the Airbnbs and hotels will be. Anyway, Beatty's only about half an hour from Death Valley, so it's actually a cheap place to go check out Death Valley while staying in a Motel 6 or whatever. But anyway, in this little town, if you stay at an Airbnb, pretty much every single one of these owners will tell you, please lock the gates after you because otherwise the burros will get in. Because they wander all over the place. They're basically like wild dogs. So, yeah. And then those of you who have taken Route 66 over by Oatman, yeah, you've seen burros over there too. So that's probably a nicer place to see burros. That's a nice town anyway. Yeah. So yeah. But yes, those were wild burros. So yeah. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer questions, but I also don't want to hold up the musician. So that's it. Okay. So oh yes. You're very welcome. We have the exhibit in there if you haven't seen it already, and we have some books over here, and we have refreshments in the back. But thank you for being such a wonderful audience, and thank you for all the great, interesting questions. And smart questions.